everybody, from Wisconsin. We have a balmy 40 degrees outside, and yep, welcome to the Bob and Sandy Show, as Bob has instructed me to say. And sky is blue and loaded with white fluffy clouds today. So it's not too bad compared to the 29 degrees we had a few days ago. And snow, about an inch of snow. Well, I'm going to start out today with talking a little bit about trees again, since our focus is on trees. And I found this somewhere, although it isn't verbatim. The tree which moves some to tears because of its beauty in the eyes of others moves to tears because of its beauty in the eyes of others becomes a green thing or an eyesore that stands in the way and must be chopped down. Now, growing up, my mother loved trees. She was a very good watercolorist, and she frequently drew and painted trees. And later in life, we used to drive in the car, and she was getting Alzheimer's and dementia. And just about every tree we passed, she'd go, "Oh, look at that beautiful tree. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that gorgeous?" So that continued through her whole life, her love of trees. And she really taught me to look at the beauty of trees also. I have one little tale here. It was when I was in junior high school. My girlfriends and my name were called over the loudspeaker that we are to report to the principal's office. And I thought, oh boy, what did we do now, huh, Chris? What did we do now? And so we walked down there, and what it was is he wanted us to draw a mural on one of the hallways of the school. And I was to draw the trees, and Chris was to draw skaters on an ice pond. So it turned out not being too bad, but for a moment there in study hall, my stomach sank, not knowing what I had done. But I don't know if they still have it on the walls, but we used, they gave us the permanent paint. So it was there for a while, I'm sure. I learned to draw trees from my mother, so she was a good teacher. I had the TV on the other day. Sometimes I watch designing programs. And what I saw on TV, they were using dead wood for furniture. Now, you might say, just what do you mean? Every piece of wood is dead once a tree is cut down, and that's true. What I mean is using the wood that is already dead in the forest. No need to use a live tree for that. You can use the ones that have already served their purpose here on the earth. But what I saw them using was a bristlecone pine tree. It had some branches, and it was used in a beautiful way. The branches were used as a coffee table base, and a very thick round piece of glass was on top of it. And it actually became, to me, a piece of artwork. It was just beautiful. I had never known what a bristlecone pine tree was, although as I reflected, I had seen it in artwork, working at the gallery. I just didn't know what they were called. But I remember when I lived in Naples, Florida, I was invited over to somebody's house, and they had this unique coffee table, again, branches underneath with a round, heavy glass piece on top. And I'd ask what it was, and she says, "Oh, that's from the mangrove tree." And it again was another piece of artwork, and I just kind of fell in love with it, and I really wanted some for myself. But in Florida, they're really hard to come by. They're protected in some respects, but what they don't do in Florida, they don't distinguish between live and dead trees. They're just a mangrove tree, which I think is a little silly, but the developers have no problem wiping out the mangroves for some condominium expansions. But I don't know, if you're a private citizen and mangroves are growing over your dock, you can't get rid of them, even though sometimes they don't smell too good because stuff gets caught under them. I had gone through, it was my son-in-law at the time, took my daughter and I for a boat ride through the mangroves in Naples, and they are the trails itself were twisty and turny, and I don't know. If I had been driving the boat alone, I'd have never gotten out of there, I'll tell you that. I wasn't even sure he could get us out of there, but obviously he did, because here I am. But one thing about the bristlecone pine trees I wanted to mention, it is one of the oldest living trees on planet Earth. I think there's some in California that are reported to be over 5,000 years old. And it is the oldest living tree that doesn't clone itself. I read somewhere where the creosote, they call it a creosote tree, but it's more like a bush, clones itself from the roots. And one of them is reported being 11,700 years old. It just keeps remaking itself, I guess. They call them a colony. They can reach up to 67 feet in diameter, which is unique. I always thought the older the tree is, the bigger it is, like the California redwoods and such. But going back to the bristlecone pine tree, I think those are only like 40 to 60 feet tall. But they're a neat tree. I can't somehow get them out of my mind here. They're twisty and turny, and around it seems kind of an arid setting in the mountains, and very little greenery. It's a very dense wood, they said, and it's pretty insect free. They can't bore into it, I guess. It's so dense. Anyway, I received something from Kelsey the other day, which Dwayne, the great writer, had wrote about Rebisar, who is one of the real guides, and I just really liked it. Well, I like all of that he writes, but this kind of hit home. Rebisar is a historical naturalist, I'm just going to paraphrase here, who had journeyed all over the earth. Sometimes he lived in the mountains and sometimes in the great forests. Dwayne said that Rebisar would talk to the trees and all of nature, and that he would carve older trees or fallen trees into things he created for others or himself. He also carved out a surfboard many centuries before they became known in Hawaii. Now, a few months ago, I had a dream where I was on the beaches in Hawaii, and there was this tall, narrow surfboard standing against a shack, and it had some kind of writing or symbols on each side of the board, not down the middle, but each side of it. And I know I had surfed with it in wherever I was, or whatever lifetime that was, if it was from another lifetime. I've watched many surfing tournaments in Hawaii at the pipeline around Hawaii, partly because there was an Eckankar there who was from the corporation. He was a professional surfer. Tommy Borges was his name, and we all used to go watch him surf, and it was quite exciting. Dwayne also said in the article that Rebisar would carve out boats and oars and things. He made his sails from whatever the all-natural environment provided. You know, what an adventure. There are, you can find these stories that Dwayne writes about Rebisar, and Paul Twitchell also, by going to the www.foundation.club or www.treetalkers.strikingly.com or www.wonderfulworldwideeducators.com, or www.dwaynethegreatwriter.com. Now, one of the things I was thinking about the other day was all the instruments, the musical instruments that are made out of wood. So what would we do without our trees? There wouldn't be violins, violas, cellos, upright basses, guitars, harps, pianos, harpsichords, woodwinds, the clarinet, the oboe, the bassoon, and other ones from Australia, the didgeridoo or the Aborigines, and drums, some drums, not all of them, banjos, even bagpipes have wood in them, organs, oriental stringed instruments. You know, without our stringed instruments and our woodwinds, what kind of orchestra would we have? You can't even, excuse me, imagine what a symphony piece like Wagner had written would sound like without the instruments that I mentioned, the strings and the woodwinds. I mean, it would have so many holes in it, I don't even know if we could call it a piece of music, because he brings in different instruments at a time. Not too long ago, I had a dream with Beethoven, and in the dream, he had hair that was the color of mercury, only it was like 1,000,000 times brighter. And it was beautiful. His whole countenance was beautiful. He shook my hand, and I woke up so grateful for that meeting. And as you may have recognized or may not have heard, Bob at the beginning of our Skype here was playing Für Elise that was written by Beethoven. So it's an interesting life that we lead. We write our adventure, as Dwayne says, and hopefully we'll have some great ones coming up. And I have fond memories. I was thinking the other day, too, of campfires. I have fond memories of campfires where the fire is blazing and crackling as it leaps towards the sky. My Uncle Lee used to make campfires for us cousins out in the middle of a field, sometimes out by, it was called the Lone Oak. But it keeps you warm if it's cool outside, and it keeps the insects and other wildlife away. So wood performs a lot of nice things for us and functions for us. So, Robert?
What was the name of that oldest tree that everybody...
Methuselah was the oldest. It's a bristlecone pine tree, and it supposedly is almost 5,000 years old. It's in the White Mountains of California.
That's one that died. That's the one that they cut. Is that the one they cut down?
No, he's still hiding up there. That was another one.
Which tree?
Wasn't it Prometheus?
Which tree was the oldest tree that got
I thought it.
that they cut
I thought that in the White Mountains. I thought that was Prometheus.
Well, how old was that one?
Over 5,000 also, but I don't know exactly. Do you remember?
No, I never heard. They said it was the oldest living tree, but if they found other ones 11,000 years, like you were saying.
Oh, that's a creosote bush. 11,700. That's a creosote bush.
Well, they said on the internet that I read that Methuselah was 4,800 years old, and they thought it was the oldest one in California. And then they went up there and they were inspecting, and they found a couple more that were over 5,000 years old, but they won't tell the public. But it's
they won't tell it where it is. It's
in that Inyo National
Park. That's in the White Mountains. Okay, I believe.
And which part of California is that?
East.
You know, when Sandy was telling about her growing up with her mother, learning about the trees. When I was in 6th grade, we had a 6th grade teacher that took our whole class and said, "Okay, I want you have a project," and we were supposed to go out and we collected leaves from every tree in northern Illinois and southern Wisconsin, every tree that we could find, and we had to get a leaf, and we had to put it in like a scrapbook where you lay it out in a scrapbook, and we had to say the kind of leaf it was and a brief description of the tree it came from, and that was kind of a fun project. and it got me going about learning about trees. And one other thing about trees that I find very interesting that not too many people talk about is every different kind of tree. Well, maybe it's not just every kind of tree, but every tree has its own personality. And what I find is like in the summer, you'll see a bunch of trees, in a grove or something standing there, and you'll have the trees with the smaller round leaves. They're just kind of they're kind of flashing them like they're show offs. And then you have the maple trees and the oak trees and elm trees and all these different trees. They all have their own personality. And there's a road that goes over from where we live near Mosinee over to Marshfield, and every time we go over there and come back, there's 2 or 3 trees about 50 feet tall where the leaves in the late afternoon when the sun's shining, they're a brilliant silver. They turn their leaves toward the sun, so they just stand out with a brilliant silvery look. And when you start paying attention to trees, I'm sure some of you guys can actually communicate with them, but you just watch them, and they all have their personalities, and they must know you're there because they show off, or they show their thing. It's quite interesting.
I have a quote that I found by Ayan Shamir, and it's advice from a tree. Stand up tall and proud. Sink your roots into the earth. Be content with your natural beauty. Go out on a limb. Drink plenty of water. Remember your roots. Enjoy the view. And that was by Ayan Shamir. I just thought it was kind of a nice quote about the trees.